Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Feeling nice and fresh. Joined by three new panellists, as you can see. With me now are Emma Reynolds, MP, who's also Shadow Minister for Europe here in the UK Parliament. John Peet, who is Europe Editor of the Economist, a publication I'm sure you're aware of. And we're also joined by Lord Wallace of Saltaire, who is the government whip here, also the government spokesman in the House of Lords on the Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs. So same procedure as we had a little bit earlier this morning. We'll hear from each of our panellists. We'll then have a bit of a discussion here, and we will be opening up to you for questions from the floor. When we get to that stage, if I could ask that your question is indeed a question, that you put it to us in a fairly brief form, and if you also tell us who you are and who you're addressing as well. We'll kick off now.
Well, thank you. And I think I will use my voice. And I will be fairly brief because we haven't got that much time, and try and address the questions on your paper, because that's what I'm supposed to do, even as a journalist. Although I came in to the very end of the last panel, and the panel didn't appear to me to be discussing the questions on the order paper at all. They were discussing instead the UK and the European Union, which is what inevitably happens when you discuss anything to do with Europe in London, or indeed increasingly now in Brussels as well. But I will come back to Britain at the end, since there is a question about Britain as well. A pan-European foreign ministry, what prospects? Well, I mean, crudely, the answer is there will not be a pan-European foreign ministry. I think that the debate that went on during the constitutional treaty arguments, and then subsequently the Lisbon Treaty, whether to call the new high representative a very high representative, or an exceedingly high representative, or possibly a European foreign minister, revealed that although most member states, perhaps all member states, do see some advantages in a common foreign and security policy, most also have reservations of one kind or another about declaring that there is now an EU foreign minister and therefore an EU foreign ministry, because it carries a sort of slight implication that somehow or other that is senior, that is more higher up in the hierarchy. So I think my answer to the question, my crude answer to the question is there is not much prospect of a pan-European foreign ministry. But I'd like to develop it in a couple of areas, just to talk briefly about the European External Action Service. I think it was inevitable in this country, certainly, but also in some other countries, notably France, but to some extent Germany and others, that the new High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy would be Hillary when she started her job, that many people would say the EAS wasn't working, that it was all costing far too much money, that the wrong people were joining the EAS, because essentially in this area what we are talking about is turf wars. It was always going to be, for quite a long time, about turf wars between, most obviously, national governments and Brussels, but I think in a way even more significant and not always appreciated by those who haven't lived and breathed the Brussels air. Brussels itself consists very heavily of turf wars, and I think in some ways the biggest enemy of the EEAS from the beginning was the European Commission. And I think that's bound to have made the life of the EEAS harder. So given that position, and I don't want to reflect too much on personalities here, given that position, I think the EEAS has actually done rather well in its first couple of years. And I do, to some extent, think that the lady herself has done quite well. The most recent one that everybody talks about is the Kosovo-Serbia deal, which I don't think could have been done by the Commission or by member states without the existence of the EEAS and High Representative. But I think the diplomacy relating to Iran has also been quite a success. And over time, the External Action Service and Cathy Ashton herself are beginning to get a better press as a result, and I think that it's absolutely justified. Having said that, I think there are questions about where a pan-European, let's not call it foreign ministry, a pan-European action service of some kind should concentrate its attentions and how. And I think my answer to that, taking particularly the Kosovo-Serbia deal but treating Iran as a slight special case, is that it's clearly more powerful in its neighbourhood. It's the neighbourhood of Europe that we really need some kind of common approach. It's when the Arab Spring breaks out, nobody knows quite what to do. That's where you need a European External Action Service that actually carries some weight and has punch. I think it's much less important when you come to talking about relations with China, with India, with the United States, or with Latin America, where inevitably quite a lot of the work of foreign policy will continue to be largely bilateral. Those countries, as I think you were hearing in the previous panel, will often say it's more efficient and quicker to talk to the Germans, the British, the French, and maybe one or two others, than to deal with the EEAS. I don't think that's a problem in those areas. I think it is more of a problem if countries like the Caucasus, the Eastern Partnership countries, Turkey, and North Africa start to think there's no point talking to Brussels, because I think that's where Brussels actually does count. So my advice for the future would be to focus much more on the neighbourhood. Second question, will an EU foreign policy be decided by qualified majority instead of consensus? I don't know whether you talked about this much in the previous panel, but my answer to that is, once again, no. I think that the view of most member states, but not all, is that it's too difficult to impose a decision on one country that feels very strongly about the matter. We could go back even to the history of the Luxembourg Compromise here, but there are many, many examples of Greece's attitude towards Macedonia, Cyprus's attitude towards Turkey, and many other examples involving Britain, Spain, France. I think that foreign policy, it's too early to try and do foreign policy by qualified majority, and I suspect it would be a mistake to try and do foreign policy by qualified majority. What I think does need to happen, and possibly this is where a more forceful High Representative could play a role, although there's a risk that that person, if there was such a person, would also run into a backlash. I think what does need to happen is that just because it's by consensus should not mean everyone says, oh well, we've got a problem with Greece, shall we say, and we can't do anything. There should be much more effort to encourage even recalcitrant countries to see that it is in their interests to reach a consensus and not to be a lone voice that's blocking an otherwise sensible policy. And in that particular case, the obviously sensible policy, which doesn't involve the EEAS but the European Commission, is the idea that Macedonia should one day join the European Union. And I think it would be useful if other countries kept the pressure up on Greece to say, we understand your problem, but we don't think that it should turn into a complete blockage that means that Macedonia can never join. So I would stick with consensus, but try and be a bit tougher in forming a consensus. And then one other thing on foreign policy, which actually elaborates a bit on something I mentioned earlier, but I meant to mention here. Turf wars I mentioned already, but the other thing that matters here often is money. And once again, I think there is a problem that the European External Action Service, although it's quite extravagant in some aspects, doesn't have enough control over money. Actually, you hear it applied to the British government. I hear people in the Foreign Office say, look, our total budget is smaller than the increase in the budget for the Department for International Development last year. So there are turf wars at national level over money. But I think Brussels and Europe would work better if some of the money that's currently under the control of the Commission was also somehow brought into the review of the EEAS and the High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy, who after all is also a member of the European Commission. So money matters. And then I'll finish with 2 points on Britain and common foreign and security policy, which I think you talked about already. It seems to me absolutely clear, even if you think that regulation is terrible, that being part of the single market is not beneficial, that our contribution to the European Union budget is too high, it seems to be absolutely clear that it is in British interests to be part of a common foreign and security policy. Because in today's world, if you talk to people from China, India, Latin America, or the United States, they clearly see Britain as, at best, a medium-sized power which happens to have a UN Security Council veto and nuclear weapons. But for historical reasons, they don't regard Britain on its own as a significant world player. And I think the fact that Obama and his people have been making very clear this year, all throughout this year, and once again this week, that in their view, Britain is a much more valuable partner for the United States as a member of the European Union, and therefore as part of the common foreign and security policy, is quite important. The one rider I would finish on is that I think it's slightly unfair to say that the British are the most anti-common foreign and security policy, because as some people were saying in the earlier session, the French are sometimes not enthusiastic about it either, and even the Germans are not keen. Germany sometimes takes its own particular view. But I think where the British could do more is to say that in some parts of the world there would actually be savings from making use of the EAS, and I think that would include, in my view, over the medium term, closing down some British posts and allowing British interests to be represented through the EEAS. Thank you.
John Peet, thank you very much. Any questions you have, do please hold on to those, because we're going to hear a little more about the British perspective now from Emma Reynolds.
Thanks, Sophie, and thanks to the Global Diplomatic Forum for the invitation to speak to you this morning. I want to focus on, first of all, the UK and our place in the world, and also our membership of the EU, and why that is important to our foreign policy standing. So let me just start by saying the UK has the 4th largest military in the world and the 7th largest economy. We have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, obviously alongside France being the other EU member that has a permanent seat. We're a leading member of NATO. And we do have a particularly close partnership with France in terms of defence. In terms of overall defence spending, France and the UK together make up 45% of spending, and in terms of R&D in defence, we make up 70%. Now, I'm leading with this sort of context, not to say that these things are an alternative to EU membership, quite the contrary, that actually our EU membership is even more important in terms of magnifying our voice in the world, especially given that we are seeing the rise of different countries. The US obviously is still very powerful, economically, politically, and also militarily. But we are seeing the rise of China, India, Brazil, other emerging economies whose, they're bugging me, whose economic power for the moment very much surpasses their military power, and perhaps even their political power to a certain extent, but who are certainly working on the military side of things. So we are living in an ever-competitive world in which, as John Peet said, although Eurosceptics deny it, we are a medium-sized country, and we should not be under any illusion that our links with the Commonwealth or the fact that we have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council count for everything. And indeed, if we were to leave the EU, I think that there would be pressure for the UK to no longer remain on the Security Council. That might happen. And if we were to leave the EU, I think our